Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for watching my presentation. My name is Mike Lauer. I'm a business major at Middle Georgia State University, and I'm here today to talk to you about technology from the year that I was born. That year was 1978. During the 70s, you had a lot of things going on. You had a lot of peace, love, happiness, but there was also some other things going on. Like one of the big topics right now is everybody's talking about wanting $15 an hour for minimum wage. Back then, minimum wage was $2.65, so a far cry from what we're looking at today. But you had some good things. Gas prices were 68 cents. We also had one of the only presidents, actually the only president from the state of Georgia was Jimmy Carter. He was actually the president at the time. And one of the popular sayings still today is don't drink the Kool-Aid. A lot of people associate that with things like not really listening to politicians or the government, things along that nature, but it actually came from a term from the era from Jim Jones. Basically, he had actually convinced a lot of people in his cult to follow him to Guyana, and it convinced them somehow to drink Kool-Aid laced with cyanide. And that's kind of what happened. Hundreds of people actually died doing that. But the main thing I want to talk to you guys today about is actually the technology is the Speak and Spell. It was a very popular toy back from the 70s and early 80s. The reason why I chose it was actually I had one. I loved playing with it. I remember as a child carrying it around. So it had a lot of games on it, especially it was very unique for its time because pretty much there wasn't anything out there else like it. But before we actually talk about it, we'll talk about the company that actually made this. That company was Texas Instruments. They were actually founded in 1951. Now, most people know Texas Instrument, or most students today probably recognize Texas Instrument from the calculators. I think everybody at some point in time in their high school or college career has had to have some type of graphing calculator, and that's pretty much what you've got from Texas Instruments. It's the $100 and something calculator that everybody dreads buying, uses it for one or two classes, and that's it. But they've actually done a lot more than just that one calculator. They were actually the first ones to make the first handheld calculator back in the early 60s. But a couple other things they were popular or well known for is they actually did the first silicon transistor, which actually led to the transistor radio. And one of the things we learned about in our chapters or in this course is they actually helped invent the integrated circuit, which is part of the technology used to go into the Speak and Spell. Um, from there's a lot of other things they've actually developed, um, but the toy that actually led up to the reason for wanting the Speak and Spell was a toy known the Little Professor. Similar to the Speak and Spell that dealt with language and letters and spelling, the Little Professor actually dealt with math and doing fun things with math. So that led to the popularity of that, and so developers decided, hey, why not take a chance and actually develop something for spelling. It was actually, the Speak and Spell was actually developed by four developers. You had Paul Breedlove, Gene Frantz, Larry Branningham, and Richard Wiggins. They came up with the idea for it. Now, back in 78 when it was developed, it actually cost around $60, which today would be upwards $350 or so. So if you think about it, it was a toy that had just a handful of things on it. Probably costs about as much as a PS4 today. So a big difference in the way the technology is used today. But one of the things that really made this toy popular back to kids my age in the 80s was its use in the movie E.T. It is actually the piece of technology that E.T. used to actually phone home and to get his parents to come pick him up. So I think with it being in that hit movie, I think a lot of kids wanted that toy at the time. So what did it actually do? Um, the Speak and Spell had 4 different levels. Basically, it would actually reward you if you spelled the word correctly. It would also, it basically had several different levels. It had the 4 levels where you actually had to spell the words that it had, or it would give you a word to spell. But it also had games that were similar to like Hangman, where it would get you to guess certain letters, and see if you could figure out the word on its own. On top of that, now the developers did reject the idea of actually adding funny comments or giving raspberries for when you actually misspelled a word. They felt like that actually rewarded bad behavior, so that was something they wanted to kind of steer away from at that time. Before this technology though, basically all you had was pull string toys or tape recorder toys. There wasn't anything that actually had any technology similar to this at that time. This was actually the first toy to actually include the DSP, the digital signal processing, which was basically the first time the human voice tract had actually been put on one single chip. It also used the integrated, the solid state speech circuitry, which use integrated circuits as opposed to just the tape recorders or the pull string. So it had a lot of different things in there, but I think the cool thing was just the way that it sounded. If you listen closely, you can kind of hear it here. And I think that was it. I think it sounded cool at the time. I think kids just loved pushing the buttons. There was a lot of things that went with that. But overall, it was actually a pretty cool toy to have, especially if you had one. Like I said, compared to the price of what it was back then, wasn't very many people that could actually afford to actually have one of the toys. Now, overall, this toy has actually led to the actual development of future toys as well. Just right in that same line, you had Speak and Math, but even jump to the day, some of the toys that my kids actually had, like the Leap Pads, the Leapfrog, all the other learning games that were actually electronic from that point on, have all really come from these types of toys from Texas Instruments. Now, the downside to it is over the years, experts, they debate one way or the other. Now, some of the experts actually have come back and actually said that it really didn't have long-term effects on kids' improved spelling. Don't know how that works because, I mean, you would think spelling the words would, over time, help memorize it, but regardless of if it worked or not, the main thing is it was still a fun toy to play with. It's still pretty cool to have. But I do appreciate you guys listening in. Thank you so much.